All right, so we are here at Galileo High School with, who is it?
Who is this guy? It's like, you gotta have a black face and then be like, who's that Pokemon? But no, hi y'all, my name is Mr. Lee. I am one of the chemistry teachers here at Galileo.
And how long have you been teaching here at Galileo?
Yeah, I'll be finishing up my 4th year here at Gal. I've been teaching chemistry here for all the 4 years. 3 years in one of the other classrooms, one of the years here. And before that, I was in Los Angeles for about 6 years.
Yeah, I was here for 2 of those years. So let's get into some personal backstory first and your path to teaching. So can you walk us through your educational journey, starting up from high school into becoming a teacher?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in high school, I was always a very curious person. I think I had a lot of experiences where I was very curious about the world that I lived in, both on a social level, but also in terms of the microscopic level with science. And so with all of that, I was able to kind of merge those two together in my high school, where I did a summer college program at Stanford, and I was learning a lot more about effective neuroscience and the neuroscience of emotion. And it was such a harmonious, collision of all my interests about the people and also the society that we live in. And so that was what I eventually studied when I went to UCLA, really learning more about how people grow and develop. And through that experience, I learned a lot more about how people grow and develop to have their own attitudes and stereotypes and preconceived notions of other people. And that really led me to education, because education was a really great place for people to not only learn about the world we live in, but also about our predispositions towards it all. And I eventually got engaged with teaching because my main focus was looking at the development of microaggressions and also implicit bias in the classroom. And that really informs the work that I do as an educator, where I'm always constantly working to unpack people's stereotypes of what the world is. First starting with science, of who a scientist is, what is considered inquiry, and then really unpacking all the different traumas that people might have, and to really have a liberatory space for people to explore the curiosities.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be beneficial for the students here, because I know myself recently, I've also gotten to understanding how I think as a person in terms of like anxious attachment and avoidant attachment and kind of like relationship insecure attachments. I think it's helped me a lot, like under the surface, understanding why I do some things and why I feel like I need some certain things from others. And I can work towards that and feel like, okay, I could provide this for myself. I do not need this for others. Make myself less dependent on other people. Not because like I think other people can't support me, but I think it's always good to have your own like place for yourself and like be able to support yourself without others for like these vital things that you need. Mm-hmm. And what ultimately led you to teach at Galileo?
Yeah, I think what you're really highlighting is how we all have different needs as a person. Of course, there's the professional need to have an occupation, but ultimately the reason why I pursued education was to have satisfaction, to have that my values and my morals be aligned to how I'm spending my time. And a lot of it was really being able to think about what kind of community do I want to be part of? What do I want to serve? And as I was thinking about my transition from Los Angeles to the Bay Area back in 2020, I was taking some Cantonese classes online at the City College of San Francisco, CCSF, and through that pathway, I was able to learn more about the community and culture through the language, but I also met some folks who happen to be also teachers here at the school. So Miss Denise Kwan, who teaches the AP Environmental Sciences, along with a bit of other biology, was a student in that particular class that I took, and I learned a little bit more about the community that she served as a result of the presentation that we did. And through that process, I was able to really become more attracted to the idea of teaching in the city, especially at Galileo, to be able to immerse myself in that community. So that was the main impetus in that direction. And then the second reason why is also being able to take care of my family, because my dad was getting a little bit older and I wanted to move closer back to home. And so really being able to take the time to be of service to my community, both my family community and also the greater community I live in, is definitely the main driving factors to being a teacher here.
Yeah, I think a lot of teachers have their personal things about like personal motivations and why they teach here. And I've asked other teachers about that a lot, and about like, you know, the pay here and like the district and what your job entitles. And there's so much that goes into it, and and most of it comes from, I want to give back to the community. I want to be able to show these students something. And I think that's really important when it comes to a job like this. Gotta want it, gotta have like something bigger than yourself. I think that's something I learned a lot too, coming into this documentary, and providing something bigger than yourself is really like an uplifting experience, and teaches you a lot about like your community and the world around you, and what giving back really means. And I think a lot of people think about like, oh, what do I get out of this? And then I kind of learned the experience that you give back to your community, and your community will give back to you. Good things will happen to you if you do good things. And I think it always circles back around. But how would you describe your overall experience at Galileo?
Yeah, I think overall it has definitely been a growing process. I think with any new transition, whether it's going from high school to college or moving to a new city, there's multiple factors of growth that need to happen. And I think it's definitely been a positive experience being able to connect with folks like you, and also being able to connect with other folks in the community as well, and just slowly being able to unravel the beauty that the city has to offer. So I would say it's a really positive process. It is also interesting because through that whole process, you're also unraveling all the hidden away woes and traumas and issues that the city has. And it's important to have different communities to be able to connect with, to have critical hope. Because I think it's been very apparent that a lot of shifts are happening in San Francisco, and some are good, some are maybe a little bit more questionable. But the main thing is really about centering on human beings and support. And I think one thing that makes me really optimistic was our teacher strike that we had in February of this year, to really have a larger conversation about what education would look like. But it's also unpacking the idea that there's been a lot of defunding of education. There's a lot of resources that are really being pulled away in that particular direction. And it's important to have that, conversation with it all. So I think overall it is optimistic in various ways. But sometimes you feel all the different pains and sorrows, and it makes it hard to see all that hope within it all.
Yeah, within all that hope and through the pains of sorrows, what would you say keeps you grounded in teaching here at Galileo? What keeps you going?
Yeah, I think the most immediate thing is the level of joy that I'm able to have in the community. Whether it's something like this where I'm able to see people grow and have awesome experiences and see people develop, that's such a gratifying experience that I can be able to be a part of, to see people be able to grow just the way that I was able to be grown and nurtured. On a second level, there's also different levels of community, which is really important. For example, today on this day of filming, it's a Wednesday, and we have our department meeting for today. And it's such a lovely space to be able to be in a positive space of colleagues who are very supportive. And I think that's something that has really sustained me in this school, recognizing that I do have a lot of colleagues that are very like-minded in values, very dedicated to their students in different ways. And we also share a lot of interests, like cycling with some other folks like Mr. McDowell or Ms. Schwanez or Mr. Cadet. So it's really nice to have that level of community in different ways. And then the final thing, I think, in addition to the students and the staff, but it's also about having the own personal level of community, where I live pretty close to Chinatown, and it's so nice to be able to connect with people there. Sometimes I'll see some of my students out and about with their families doing different things, like they have certain folks that own certain businesses, and it's lovely to be able to support them in that way. And it always feels great that we're able to see each other with positivity and excitement, as opposed to that kind of, oh, that's my teacher kind of thing. And so it's really cute, it's really nice, and it brings me a lot of joy. And those are the things that I remember as I go through all the different trials and tribulations of education.
Coming into more of like the community, and you said this earlier, watching your students go with you through freshman and senior year. I know I've done that with my teachers. I revisit my freshman teachers like during my junior year. I revisited my freshman teachers like so many times, and I feel like I've changed and matured so much ever since then. And it's like so fun to just come back and like, hey, how have you been? This is how I've changed, and this is what I've been doing. From I feel like I used to be like a super bratty kid, but now I'm like more mature. I'm learning stuff like that. But what would you say is your relationship with your students, especially like watching them grow up and maybe revisiting you in future years like I am now?
Yeah.
How would you say that is for you?
It's very interesting because a lot of it happens very serendipitously, similar to how you have a certain project or a certain interest and it happens to realign in that way. Or there might be some students who are interested in taking an advanced science class like AP Chemistry, and then students will come back and visit and say, oh, hey, I noticed you're teaching AP Chemistry. How is that going to work out? But a lot of it also happens through intention. Last year, I was finishing up my stay as one of the class cabinet advisors. So I had a group of students who I started taking on in their junior and senior year to help guide them to do different school events like boat dance and prom, and that's been really nice. So I think a lot of it within my space is really just being a mentor for a lot of folks. A lot of it is giving guidance to people in their academic trajectory and also trying to shape the community and culture by being a role model, but also being an advisor in different ways. And I think a lot of it is just being able to see myself as an asset to support people in that way. And I think that's something I also try to do in my classroom, which is very positive. I try to treat students with the level of respect that I hope to have. I try to have more of a student-centered classroom and having more of a facilitator position as opposed to sage on the stage. So that really breaks down some of those particular apprehensions that some students might have to being able to connect with someone who might be a bit more older or a bit more thoughtful than them in that way. So I would say that I have a relatively good relationship with folks in that particular way, and I do have an open door for students to come in and share, and I'm happy that I'm able to connect with people in various ways.
Yeah, I think that's like one of those super important things as a teacher, and we'll get to this maybe in a future episode with a different teacher, Mr. Lynch, talking about pedagogy and like how does your teaching go and how does that make it successful for you? I feel like for you, it's mostly like connecting with your students a lot and being able to be a resource to them when they need it so that they can grow, but they also don't feel like they're following a curriculum and it has to be that way, that they can grow in their own way. And I want to move on to district policies. How do district policies affect your day-to-day work in the classroom?
Yeah, I think district policies are very multifaceted where they have a lot of constraints, where it's budgetary, or maybe they have a constrained idea of what education is looking like, because sometimes they may have a very narrow idea of what experiences they might be calling to enhance. And I think the main constraint right now is about budget. So one thing that we were trying to decide on as a whole school community and as a place is think about what size our school is going to be in terms of classroom sizes. That's a really big thing, and it's really challenging because in my first year here, I think the largest class size I had was about 32, and that was fully maxed out. But now in my fourth year here, the max that I've had is about 38, and then we had to narrow it down to about 36 because we didn't have enough space for students in terms of chairs. So that's definitely been a very difficult piece to work with, because even though it's only about a 10 to 15% increase in students' capacity, it's really challenging to meet their needs in that way. The second thing as well is also looking at the hiring practices as well. For example, some of the schools that we would need, or some of the school requirements, is to have students with special needs to have the support from paraprofessionals or special education specialists. And unfortunately, we've been very understaffed in that way because of our hiring practices in different ways. And so as a result, we'll have certain classes with students with a great amount of needs and we don't have the same supports. So a lot of students, whether it's that specific population, they may not get the exact services necessary, or I'm neglecting other students who would need the support because there's such a large concentration. So I think the major policy is that the right number of staffing is really important. The right amount of talent is helpful. And that's one kind of consideration and constraint, but also thinking about our class choices and decisions as well, where we were trying to offer AP Chemistry for this past year, but because of the fact that AP teachers only teach 4 classes, or one less class, typically 4, as opposed to 5, that was a major consideration for me to not teach AP Chemistry for last year. And that's also another constraining factor for this year, is if we can be able to have enough staff to cover those particular positions because of that district policy. So I think what I'm naming is that a lot of the budgetary restraints and a lot of district policies does have a negative impact. And my hope is that we'll be able to provide more funding, but also provide more opportunities to us to reallocate some of the funding, given that some funding can be misused in different ways.
Yeah. Let's get on to how does your living situation intersect with your work as a teacher?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the whole budgetary reasons, because I think a lot of people will live in different areas because they have to be able to meet that living criteria and pay for rent or their mortgage. And I think one thing that I'm very fortunate to have is to have a stable housing situation because of the city's policy and programs on affordable housing. So I live very close to where I work, which is nice. I do also like biking, so I usually commute to get to school by bike, and it takes me about 15 minutes, which is really lovely. And because of the proximity that I have and the beautiful commute, I'm able to have a lot more capacity to be here at school as a teacher, as a mentor, and as a community member. So I think it has a positive impact, but there was a time where I was living over on the East Bay, and I do know some of my colleagues do that, and that can be very taxing in different ways because you get less time for oneself. You have to spend more time and energy and money commuting. There's also a lot of variables that can happen. I know that this year there's been a lot of BART shutdowns, and so that has prevented some people from coming into work. So I think that I'm very fortunate to have a living situation that is close to where I work, and I'm able to also integrate myself in the community in more authentic ways.
All right, thank you. And I'm gonna throw you a little bit of a curveball here. How do you think that students like me can continue to help our teachers and empower their voices within the district so that we could see these changes in the district and that we could help our teachers help ourselves? Yeah, I think that's something that we students need to start working towards, because as it is right now, education and for the future, or how it's going now, it's like it's going down. It's down the district. It's like it's getting harder for teachers every day. And I think in the future generations, where we will struggle to have like proper education, that's going to affect our society as a whole. So I think I've talked to other people about this, and they say that why it's important for the youth to take action is because not only are those actions going to be implemented and reflected on us when we're adults, but also it's going to be implemented on our future generation. And like I said before, it's all going to come back to us, and then we're going to wish that we should have made a change or tried to make a change earlier, when our voices are powerful, and that we're recognizing at this age, that students at this age are recognizing, hey, something's wrong, and we really need to do something about this before something hits the fan. So back to my question.
Yes.
What would you say students can do to help teachers and empower their voices in the district?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think there's a lot of positive intention that comes from that question. Really recognizing that people identify and acknowledge that there is an area of need. That's like the first part. And sometimes when a student is so enamored with all the different things in life, it's hard to have capacity to even consider that.
Right.
So I think that's definitely one thing, to work on oneself, to build one capacity, take care of oneself, to really have that open-mindedness to explore those. I think that's the first thing to highlight. And then the second thing is to have conversations just like we're having now. I think a lot of it was, especially during the strike in February, a lot of students were just thinking like, oh, how is this affecting us as individuals? What's going on during the strike? And I'm sure a lot of people are very interested and curious, and having those conversations are really important to be able to refine that perspective and that lens and value, but also to brainstorm different ideas for agency. And then finally, recognizing that all these different issues and situations are created on a systemic level, it also takes systemic change to be able to address those things. So being able to have grassroots organizing, building coalitions of people to have their voice be amplified, I think that's the most important thing to be able to make change. And I think I'm coming from the perspective that there's multiple areas of change that can happen. It could either be, sending out letters to, board of supervisors. It could be talking to politicians, trying to influence those folks and having them included in those conversations. That's one way. But also being able to recognize that those individual students and people can be able to make a longitudinal change by having these values and these perspectives, and then being able to become those people who can eventually be change makers in that way. So I think I have a very optimistic perspective where oftentimes it just comes from humanizing people and having conversations and being in community. And I think that is definitely one of the major pieces, to just to have conversations and to see people as holistic individuals.
Yeah, thank you. And one more thing. I don't know if you could speak for a lot of teachers on this, but what would you say for most teachers is like one change in the district that you would all want to see? I know we're all like different and we all like different things, but I feel like what's the most important thing that could change for teachers as we are right now to start us on a good path of like recovering education and like making public education powerful and being able to send students off with a good education, a good mindset, and to be successful.
Yeah, there's many different things, and I wouldn't say it's just one thing because it wouldn't solve everything, but it's really a cascading effect. So I think we had mentioned very briefly about staffing in different ways, and we only focused it on the direction of just the in-classroom staff for the A through G requirements. But there's also all these wraparound services that are really necessary.
Sorry, I want to ask a quick question.
Yeah.
We could do like a little back and forth here.
Sure.
So about staffing, maybe we'll get into a little bit of statistics because I know some of our viewers. I know some of our viewers will see it the problem better when it's on the graph, when it's on the numbers. Bing. We'll have like a little graph. So would you say at Galileo, and then maybe if you could answer a little bit further within the district, how do you think is like the teacher to student ratio per school?
It depends on how you calculate it. It's so interesting. So we at Gal have a lot of specialized programs. We have a special day class for folks that are moderate to severe in their areas of need. And so those classes are really small because you would typically have a lot of support staff to support them with everyday actions. And so at our school, our student to teacher ratio looks kind of funky in that way. For the general population, my average in classes is around 35, 36, something around there. But then when you have certain classes where they only have 6 students because they're of high needs, it shifts the numbers in that way. You can have a whole math lesson on the difference between an average versus like a median or the mode in different ways. So that's where the statistic comes in, where the average is obviously deflated because of those specialized programs, but that's because we have a high need with it all. We also have a newcomer program where those are intentionally a little bit smaller because those have very high language needs in those ways. And so it does shift down a little bit. So I would say, if I were remembering correctly, I think our school, the official number is supposed to be around like 22 or 23 students per staff member, but it's also very, adjusted. And I would say the mode, is probably around 34, I would say, if you were to think about the most common one in that direction.
Yeah. All right. One last question. How do you envision the future of education in San Francisco and also in America as a whole?
Yeah, I think I would like to have an optimistic position because I still have about 20 to 30 years in my teaching career, and I would like it to be a positive trajectory for sure. I do, however, would love to see it as a roller coaster in different ways, like the stock market, where sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. But, overall, I hope that it goes up. And we think about what kind of metrics we have for all of this. One thing I hope to really focus on is really focusing on students' sense of belonging and self-efficacy. I think what's really great is that we're having a greater conversation about students' mental health and also having supports, which is one of the things I hope that we are able to have, more wraparound services like wellness, being able to have psychiatric social workers, and also school programs to really enrich students in different ways outside of the classroom. So that's something I would hopefully be more optimistic about, and that can definitely happen at the local level, where you're able to have more community organizations to be able to come and support different things, sort of like what we're doing now with Eli coming through to provide a lot of love. That gives me a lot of optimism. And I would hope that we'd also be able to adjust our funding to properly allocate for that. We do know that with inflation and all the other different needs of repairs that a school needs to have, it needs to have money. So whether that's some sort of proposition to be able to provide that money, or maybe the schools could inherently be able to be some sort of revenue generator, maybe through games or being able to have different sports and athletics. There's a lot of different ways you could do that. But my hope is that we'll be able to have more services in that direction. And then I think the last thing that I hope that we'll be able to have is a general level of inclusion in different areas. I know that there's a lot of organizations and also a lot of students of different ethnic backgrounds and religious backgrounds. And we know now that there's a lot of tension that is happening as a result. And so my hope is that we're going to be able to see each other as human beings, and then be able to see that those identities is just a small factor, and how do we have a level of continuity of community to be able to connect those different peoples together. And hopeful that they will see their similarities and their devotion towards having good values and community, as opposed to the differences in which they practice them.
And also, actually a few more questions. I'm getting so intrigued. What do you feel like is the biggest barrier between the district and communication of the district and the teachers and students, and getting things worked out between there? Do you feel like maybe there's corruption, or do you feel like there's people are just I don't know how to phrase it.
Yeah, I think the question you're asking is
between, because we need to think of the district and the teachers and students. We need to think each other as a team.
Yes.
We can't just be fighting against each other, because we're never going to get anywhere with education. So what do you feel like is the biggest barrier between the district and education, and district education and us us together as the district education and the teachers and students against the main problem?
Yeah, I think oftentimes it really comes down to having that sense of community, and recognizing that community is something that takes time to develop and grow. And it's something that's very difficult to have if your leadership is very stochastic. Just this past year, we've had an interim superintendent. And I think similar to having a teacher in the classroom, where if you had one teacher and then you have some time to build these norms and different expectations, and then you suddenly have a new teacher and you're constantly setting up different ways with their style.
Oh, yeah.
So I think a large part of it is because there's a lot of continuity needs of leadership, and that makes one of the biggest challenges to having changes, where you're working on a special project with someone and then that person is no longer there, that project kind of goes away. So that's one way, I would say. And that obviously influences a lot of decisions that are made at that level. And I think one potential solution, and that's something that is very challenging to have, is to have some sort of a network of leaders who'd be able to create that kind of capacity and change. Oftentimes, from my understanding, it's usually just one or two people that make a big decision.
Yeah.
And the goal is hopefully to have that level of flexibility where if someone leaves for some reason or something is going on, they could be able to make a decision in that direction.
Good afternoon, Lions. This is your business
Guess that's it.
Probably okay.
Yeah.
It's Treasury and Bonus. Food Fest. Food Fest is this Friday, April 24th, so make sure to bring cash to support your favorite club. There will be boba, Hawaiian butter mochi, donuts, pizza, chicken bake, and more.
Yum.
Come early during lunch before everything sells out. Seniors, we have 30 days left of school. Decision day is next Friday, May 1st, so make
That's
sure
right.
to open your college
Decision
merch
day.
out on the courtyard at lunch.
Oh yeah.
Senior versus Faculty Week is next week, from April 27th to May 1st. Please note there has been a schedule change. Basketball will now be on Tuesday, April 28th, and volleyball will be on Wednesday, April 29th. Seniors, please attend Fun Club this Thursday in room 308 to go over logistics. And teachers, please check your email for the sign-up form. Elections! ASC election voting will take place next week from Monday to Friday, ending May 1st. Voting is open only to Galileo students, and any outside votes will be disqualified. Seniors are not allowed to vote, and students may only vote for their own grade class captain. But all grades will go for section.
I wanted to vote for Isaac Meza.
Oh, I think you can do that one. That's student delegate. I think you still do that one.
Oh wait.
That one's different. So that's a district position, I believe, or like a outside of school thing. And then the other ones are if for the school.
Yeah. I actually don't know a lot about like student and like district positions. Yeah. I didn't know what like student delegate was.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is there's a lack of, I won't say communication for all these things, but it is, you have to be intentional about communicating these. And I think the intention is to make it function versus, advertising. Because it's always like, it's someone's job to do it. Anyways.
Yeah, do you have a, so of course this podcast documentary is a space for teachers to come out with like things that the district needs to hear and the public needs to hear of importance. So outside of the questions we answered, is there anything that like that needs to be brought up that our students need to hear, that district needs to hear, that San Francisco needs to hear about teachers and about the situation?
I mean, I think we've spent the last 30 to 40 minutes talking about all the different areas of needs. And I think the main thing, if I were to summarize the area of need, is just really being able to meet where people are at. I think oftentimes where if a student that I'm having is maybe having some difficulties, or maybe they're having not the best experience, or they are having a lot of successes, a lot of it is about being there with them, to celebrate those successes, to really be there at that ground level, to really work together. And I think that's really a big shift. Oftentimes it's kind of like a table where we're sitting at the same level, we're having a conversation, we're talking about things, and we're working together. And I think that's really what I would invite people
One
to
more
do.
quick announcement. Anyone who's running in the elections has a mandatory meeting right after school in the library tomorrow, April 23rd. Go Lions!
Go Lions.
Yes. And I think the whole Go Lions, a lot of it is about, having that same sense of community. I think oftentimes there's this level of otherness where it's just like, oh, they don't know, or oh, they don't go there. I hope that with my perspective and the way that I'm sharing stuff, I don't place too much judgment on certain individuals or certain positions, but it's really just a call to say, hey, we just want to have some conversations. We want to make sure that we're able to have a more holistic and more informed decision-making process. And it's important to have ownership and buy-in and some level of conversation. And I know it is not practical for every single thing, but it just feels a little bit disconnected in various ways, which is why we ended up resulting in a strike where there was a lack of communication and bargaining in good faith. So I think it's important to be able to have that level of humility and sense of community to have these conversations.
All right, that was great. That's the end of it. Now I gotta think of like outro. Make sure to like and subscribe and follow for more teacher podcasts now.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. I'll think of an outro, but